I stopped at the top of the stairs to catch my breath. My NROTC uniform was completely drenched with sweat. You look like a mess, Gary, I thought to myself. I practically ran the last mile from school to catch the monorail. I quickly pulled my Metro card out and swiped it in the kiosk slot. The machine dispensed my ticket as I ran through the monorail doors as they slid closed. Once in, I scanned the car and spotted 2 empty seats in the front. The monorail was pretty full tonight. I threw my backpack in the seat closest to the window and then dropped myself in the seat next to the aisle. One of the drawbacks of still living at home was that I had to commute back and forth to MU, where I was in my freshman year in college. My evening classes ran long by 20 minutes, which made me late for the earlier monorail home. I just sat back and closed my eyes for what seemed like a second. The next thing I remember is the sensation of slowly falling on my right side and onto my backpack. This quickly woke me up, and I sat right up in my seat. I looked back and saw a handful of people in the back row of the car. The monorail suddenly came to a stop. As the computerized female voice came over the loudspeaker and said, "Fuller Park Station," the door slid open, and I saw people exit. The door shut, and we once again started moving. "Excuse me, what time is it?" I heard a female voice say from behind me. I turned around to see a single passenger left, a red-haired woman, in black, with tinted glasses, seated at the end of the car. I looked down at my watch and said, "It's 10 p.m., ma'am." "Thank you," she replied. I then decided to pull out my history text and see how many pages I had to read for my next week. "Wow, are you in the Army?" I looked up from my book. I glanced over my shoulder briefly. "No, the Navy." I didn't feel like going into detail. I looked back down at my book, concerned about how many hours I would have to read to be ready for next week's quiz. "It's so admirable to see a young man such as yourself serving in our country," she said. "It's my pleasure to serve," I replied politely. "So are you home on leave or headed back to base?" I stopped, took a deep breath, turned around, and said, "Headed home, ma'am." What is this, 20 questions, I thought. We rode in silence for a few minutes when she said, "You're such a polite young man." "I try, and you don't make it easy," I said under my breath. As I turned to acknowledge her, it seemed she'd move up a few seats. I now had a better look at her. I saw that her head was higher than mine. I'm 5'9", making her at least 6'2", maybe 6'3". Her face was long and narrow. Her cheeks were sunken in like she'd been ill. Her makeup was too dark for her skin tone because you could see her very pale white neck in contrast to her face. Tall and homely, probably a librarian. I just smiled and went back, looking through my book. "So, do you live close by?" I turned around. "Yup, I'm just getting off at Thorndike Ave." "Oh, the monorail's last stop. Me too," she said. "This area has changed a lot over the years. Now, it's not safe to walk the streets alone at night. There are all sorts of lunatics out there that will kill you for no reason. The police are so thinly spread across this town that you can be dead for hours before help arrives. I couldn't persuade you to walk home with me," she laughed. I half-heartedly said, "Wish I could, ma'am, but I'm pressed for time." The woman must have confused me with a Boy Scout. "Oh, well, I guess I should not be afraid of what's lurking in the dark. There are worse things than a fast, painless death," she said in a nonchalant manner. I thought that was a strange thing to say. I turned to check the digital route map in the back of the car and saw the woman filing her nails with a very shiny and pointy nail file. She had extremely long, muscular-looking hands. "You're a very handsome young man. Anybody ever tell you that? Buy a girl a drink, sailor." As she said sailor, her voice seemed to go deep for a second. I let out an uncomfortable laugh. I looked back at her and was shocked to see she'd moved up and was sitting in the row behind me. I was now staring directly at her. I was struck by the horror of the distorted and deranged image in front of me. This odd and annoying person was wearing some sort of ghastly vinyl mask under a wig and glasses. It was painted to look like a small girl's Cupid doll. I quickly turned back and pretended to look at my book. It all started to add up. The height, the hands, and the voice. I immediately tensed up at the realization that this person was no woman. But why the bizarre mask and all this deception? I then remembered that the police had been looking for some psycho that the local newspapers had dubbed the Slasher. who attacked a person with a knife in and around the area for the past 6 months. One eyewitness described him as a young male. Another said he was an old man with gray hair. One cop they interviewed on the news suspected he may be using disguises to throw off the police and conceal his identity. Crap! Could this person be the slasher? I tried to think of what to do. I pulled out my cell phone, but noticed the battery was dead. I started to break out in a cold sweat. Is this how this freak show got his thrills? Catching people off guard and scaring them with that mask, and watching them panic, or freeze in fear? I hit the screen with my finger and pulled the phone to my ear. Hey Mike, it's me. Look, I'm almost at the station. Is Dad with you? Cool, see you in a minute. So your family is waiting for you at the station. How convenient. He didn't sound too convinced. I unzipped the pocket on my book bag and put back my cell phone. I slowly fished around the pocket for my Swiss Army knife, only to remember I'd left it at home. The odds were that the station would be completely deserted at this time of night. I wonder if that was his plan. Get me alone, then follow me off the monorail, then pounce. I heard a loud bang that made me jump forward in my seat. I turned to my left and saw that he had hit the top of the seat next to me with his nail file. My, you seem so nervous. Now he was just toying with me. The computerized voice came on over the loudspeaker. Thorndike Avenue Station. End of the line, he said. I felt the sweat form on my forearms as I prepared to get up from my seat. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I threw my backpack over my shoulder, jumped out from my seat, and ran for the doors. The slasher tried to get up fast, but slipped on his heels and fell back into the seat. As he struggled to get up, he shouted in a very masculine voice, "Where do you think you're going, you little shit?" I ran onto the platform and saw nobody. Without thinking, I ran to my right and down the platform. I saw a small group of teenagers and started yelling, Hey guys! As I reached them, I turned and saw nobody behind me. The creep must have run the other way. I had them call the police. They came out and took a full report. I never rode that monorail again. The slashings eventually stopped. They never caught the slasher, but one of his last victims did describe him as a tall, thin, pale man.